anyone else notice that no one talks about these old Spider-Man books? And I mean, really talk about them. They're name dropped all the time by people doing Spider-Man adaptations, but when the adaptation actually comes out, it's got nothing to do with those comics. Hello kids! Like Spider-Man? Well, do we have a movie for you? Check it out! And guess what? We are really 100% actually using the Steve Ditko and Stan Lee comics as inspiration. Yeah. I don't buy it. So does that mean that there's something wrong with these old books? Or is the entertainment industry just flat out wrong? Let's find out. So we all know Spider-Man's origin. Lonely kid, spider bite, dead uncle, but no one remembers the most important thing about Peter in these early comics. He's a dick! Like, this guy plans to rob banks or thinks about letting Flash Thompson die at the hands of Dr. Doom. This guy started as a huge prick with a real chip on his shoulder after years of being bullied and misunderstood. The only people who actually liked Peter and understood him was his aunt and uncle. So when his uncle dies, it's not just him losing his father figure, but in a way losing his best friend. Now Peter wasn't the only one suffering after Ben's death, it was also Aunt May. Now even though it would only take like one death stare to take out Aunt May, this didn't mean her soul was weak just because her body was failing her. She was strong-willed and always tried to set Peter on the right path. When Peter was not at home or fighting supervillains, he was attending Midtown High, and in between classes was being insanely bullied by Flash Thompson and his friends. While this guy hated Peter, he was actually obsessed with Spider-Man. He would try to show the people of New York that Spider-Man was an amazing guy by forming a Spider-Man fan club or trying to fight Spider-Man's #1 hater, J. Jonah Jameson. Jameson would use his power in the newspaper business to ruin Spider-Man's good name. This seemed like some kind of unknown hatred for no good reason, but it was actually because Jameson believed that if he admitted that Spidey was a good person, then that means he is truly nothing more than a selfish man who only cared about making money. With Peter's uncle gone, and with no other way to pay their bills, Peter starts taking photos of Spider-Man and selling them to J. Jonah Jameson. And while doing this, Peter would meet JJ's secretary, Betty Brant. And about 1 or 2 issues later, they would start dating. But after a battle with Dr. Octopus, Betty's brother would end up dying and, for a time, would blame Spider-Man for this. This would cause their relationship to slow down a little bit, but the true thing that killed it was when Liz Allen, the girlfriend of Flash Thompson, started to take interest in Peter and would not stop trying to get him to join her and Flash's group. So now Peter's got 2 ladies interested in him. Good for him, start a fan club. After this, Ned Leeds would start taking interest in Betty, and with Liz not leaving Peter and Betty alone, they would end up breaking up. Shortly after this, Betty would end up leaving New York without a word to Peter. But Aunt May has Peter covered, because she is trying to set him up with a girl named Mary Jane Watson. But Peter is disgusted by anyone without blonde or jet black hair, so he declines. Now, girl troubles and bills aren't the only thing getting in the way of Peter's happy life. He also has supervillains. Yay! There's Vulture, Lizard, Sand Guy, Shocky Hands, Furry, the Grinch, Now You See Me, Now You Don't, and Professor Calamari. These guys are just so fun, and it makes sense why they all became iconic. Let's start with my favorite villain in this run, Doc Ock. This guy gets blown up, decides he's better than everyone else, and takes over a hospital where he was staying so he can begin his work again. In a hospital? You dumb fuck. Peter finds out about this and goes to fight the doctor, but is so overwhelmed by Octopussy's mechanical arms, he ends up losing and wonders if he's even cut out to be a superhero. But after hearing words of wisdom from the Human Torch, he decides that he can never give up and decides to go after Dr. Octopus again. Meanwhile, Doc Arms tries to bring over his super dangerous experiment to the big city, thinking that he can make it work in the nearby power plant. Spider-Man, finding out about this, goes to take down the doctor and is able to defeat him. Lizard's story is tragic, because the kind-hearted man in Dr. Connors is accidentally turned into a lizard and tries to turn the whole world into lizards. So yeah, pretty good adaptation. But the difference is he has no idea that he's Dr. Connors, to the point where he starts looking for Connors to help him make more giant lizards. Now some of these villains just want to steal money, like Sandman, Vulture, Electro. They just want to get rich, and that's fine. Not everyone has to have a super tragic backstory or a fall from grace. You also have Mysterio, and he really just wants to be flashy and prove he's better than Spider-Man, but he would always get taken out in a single punch. But just because he doesn't have the might of other villains doesn't mean he's any less than them. Hell, there's this one story where Mysterio uses holograms to trick Spider-Man into a therapy session and almost gets him to take off his mask. There's also the Green Goblin that we know nothing about. He really just kinda wants to chill with mobsters and mess with Spider-Man. We would always get close to finding out who he really is, but then never would. Now, I did forget one villain earlier, Chameleon. He was Spider-Man's first villain in issue 1. He framed Spider-Man for one of his crimes before Spider-Man stopped him and handed him in to the police. But now, he's out, and he finds himself in contact with Spider-Man again. Wanting to take him down forever this time, he calls in his half-brother, Kraven the Hunter, to help him take down Spider-Man forever. But, of course, they're both defeated and sent out of the country. I said something about falling from grace earlier, so how about this villain, Scorpion? Gorgon starts out as a hired stalker by Jameson to follow Peter around to find out how he gets his photos. Now, he never does, but Jameson finds a new use for him.
Should we be doing this?
Why not? We gotta kill Spider-Man. Fair enough. Gorgon is turned into the Scorpion and is sent to capture Spider-Man. But because of shitty science, the Scorpion is turned insane and becomes a supervillain. Jameson is terrified of the Scorpion because he would either kill him or reveal that he had a hand in creating him. Most of Spider-Man's villains come together and form the Sinister Six, and kidnap Aunt May and Betty Brant. This is really bad timing for this to happen because Peter's powers have stopped working. But as soon as he regains confidence in himself, he is able to defeat the villains and regain his powers. In case you couldn't tell, a big struggle for Peter is self-doubt, and dealing with what the public and Jameson say about it. But he is always able to rise above and gain faith in himself when others don't. About 28 issues in, Peter finishes high school and says goodbye to a lot of faces that he once knew, like Liz Allen. But not Flash. They're going to the same college. You just won't quit! Peter starts going to Empire State University, and meets Harry Osborn and Gwen Stacy. But he can't really get to know them because, dun dun dun, Aunt May is sick. Like, super sick. She's gonna die because of a blood transfusion with Peter that happened issues earlier. This causes Peter to go very cold to everyone at school, and they write him off as just a prick. Peter finds out a way to help Aunt May, and goes to Dr. Connors to make the cure. But just when they are about to finish the cure, and only need one more thing, this prick comes in and steals it because he can! Doc Ock steals the serum that Spidey and Doc Connors need to help Aunt May. So Spider-Man goes to get it back, and ends up tracking Doc Ock to his underground base. And after a very heavy battle, the roof to the base collapses, letting Doc Ock get away, but also leaving Spider-Man stuck under it with the serum just out of reach. Spider-Man thinks he's out of luck, stuck under a giant piece of metal that weighs the same as a train. And with water slowly flowing in, he thinks that it is all over and he failed. But, not wanting Aunt May to die just like Uncle Ben, he finds the willpower to lift the metal and set himself free. Peter is able to cure Aunt May's sickness and returns to his life at school, and is pretty confused why everyone hates him. But little does he know, not everyone does. Because Gwen Stacy believes that he is not so bad of a guy and wants to find out what he's really like. Okay, what else? A lot of Ayn Rand shit, Peter being weird, first look at Norman Osborn. That's really it. That was Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's time on the character. Now, Stan Lee would return with John Romita Jr. and continue the book until issue 100.
So now that we know everything that we do from those comics, why do people never adapt them? Well, I think it's because those comics were made back in the Silver Age of comics.
meaning they were filled with goofy villains and bright colors. And the mainstream thinks that's too kiddie and unserious, even though those books have just as many interesting characters as the newer books that are coming out that they can't stop adapting. Now, of course, lots of those adaptations are good in their own right, but I can't help but want one that takes this super fun world and colorful costumes and puts it through somewhat of a modern lens, but still the same world. But hey, if they won't do it, at least that I know that amazing fans will do something like that. And I guess just like these comics, that is truly amazing.